We got the Zoom warning. What's up, guys? Stu, Jason, thank you for joining us. Everyone that's here attending, all of our gym owners, thank you for joining us as well. We have a jam-packed hour here. So the subject of the webinar is creating wealth, and creating wealth as a gym owner. And I think, Jason with NCFIT and Stu with, everything you've done with your gym urban movement that, you've now exited from, and what, the expertise with working with gym owners, I think both of you have a lot of value that you can provide here, and insights on why it's so important to really put a plan in place so that you're not, don't have this endless plan of coaching, for the foreseeable future, right? Like, what is the exit? How is having a gym, being a gym owner, really going to provide some wealth? So without further adu, Jay, do you want to just kind of kick us off with maybe specifically what we've gone through at NCFIT in the past kind of year and a half?
Yeah, so first, Stu, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. You're definitely a guy that I love talking to about this particular subject. I think the business of fitness is fascinating. I think what you did, being able to purchase your building, is a really cool story, especially when we talked about on the Effort Over Everything podcast. And I think that talking about that today, I think, is critical. I also think when we talk about building wealth, as gym owners, I think it's a topic that when I first got into CrossFit in the 2005, 2006, when gyms started popping up, it was never a topic of conversation to talk about exit strategy, wealth. It was just like, hey, we're doing what we love for a living. And I think that's incredible. But over the years, we've had now NCFIT for 13, 14 years. You start asking yourself, hey, am I going to be able to coach the 5 a.m. class every day until I'm 50, 60, 70? And maybe you can, but maybe you want to start thinking about how do you create this larger ecosystem so you could still do what you love for a living, but pivot it just a little bit. So for us at NCFIT, we have a variety of different verticals we work in, right? We have brick and mortar, we have corporate wellness, we have digital. Now, I'm not saying that's the way that all gym owners should go, but that's the way we've shifted. In Stu's case, he's done a great job explaining how you can actually purchase the building and use that as an additional catalyst for wealth, which I'm excited to talk about. But one thing that I wanted to jumpstart this idea off of is that you can't grow your numbers without knowing your numbers. And I think something that's been really, really helpful for us at NCFIT is getting the team and being more transparent with our numbers. So a couple of years ago, before COVID hit, our brick and mortar, because I want to kind of focus on that, I think that's more relevant to this conversation for the gym owners here, was very successful, very financially successful. And I think we allowed ourselves to get a little bit comfortable, a little bit complacent, and we had areas where we were not optimized. And now through COVID, we've basically had to start over again and look at everything and say, hey, we're here. We need to get to here. How are we going to get there? And I think getting the team bought in and being transparent is rule number one. So I want to dive into that a little bit more, but before we get into that, Stu, what are your kind of initial thoughts here on building wealth as a gym owner? I'm kind of laying this framework that we took one direction, you took a little bit different.
I go back to, first off, guys, thanks so much for having me. It's always good jamming with you guys. I go back to the same thing you said, but the reason none of us were talking about it is because nobody had walked that far yet. We're all kind of walking at the same pace together. The only thing we could have ever seen was a conglomerate, a Gold's Gym, a big franchise, and that wasn't this, this micro gym CrossFit affiliate world that we were in. So no one had traveled that far. And I think even now, like Jason, go back 5 years ago, we're still not talking about it 5 years ago. Now like guys like you and me are now trying to drum up those conversations, but I think it's also just due to the nature of the youth of this micro gym affiliate industry. Because remember, guys, we came from a world where you had 30,000 plus big box gyms and you had some small personal training facilities. This micro gym affiliate thing is relatively very young. So I think me, you, and then other guys are going to come through, hopefully, is my hope, and they're going to have like, oh, this is how I developed wealth and went my way. And I think there's be other ways other than real estate or developing different verticals. But the real estate side is the one that I can speak to efficiently.
So I think that, a good next step here, Stu, you had some kind of numbers that you wanted to show, and I think that would be cool to go into.
Yeah. So my come to Jesus moment, guys, came, and Jason's right. I'm not a math guy by trade. You roll me a barbell, within 5 nanoseconds, I know how much weight's on that barbell. But that's kind of where my basic math acumen kind of ends.
45s and 25s?
That's it, dude. And even in college, I was like the color-coded guy because I'm like, all right, 2 reds and 3 blues equals this. Like I was like a 6-year-old doing math. But I learned to respect it. And Jason, that line you said is something I say all the time. When you're not doing as well, you want better numbers. Well, the only way to get better numbers is to fuck with your numbers, to respect them. You don't have to love crunchy numbers, but you do have to respect it and look at them. And this right here, I'm gonna do a quick screen share for everybody. This was kind of a come to Jesus I had. So this is a hypothetical scenario. Okay, on the left is percentage of revenue as divvied up between the various aspects of our business. You have revenue at the top on the left-hand side at 100%. Okay, underneath that you have the things that take away from revenue in the red. Operating expenses. Average micro gym might be at around 40% operating expenses. This would include things like rent. This would be your insurance. This would be your Wi-Fi membership. All that. Payroll. Okay, maybe a gym starting off is maybe still, they haven't really developed a lot of full-time staff, so they've got maybe a low payroll amount. Owner pay, still pretty low. They're just starting off. They're in their first couple of years of ownership. They haven't really escalated their pay structure. Tax, generally I'm just putting 10% on there because I don't know where you are in the country and what your tax burden is. And that would leave 20% left over for profit. Okay, and if we actually attributed that to numbers, so maybe in your year 3 of business, you did 285,000 revenue. 40% OPEX would be 114,000. 16% payroll would be 45,000. 14% owner's pay would be 40,000. Tax at 28.5 and profit at 57,500. So I just create this hypothetical scenario. But then I look at it, I go, okay, let's say that was my gym. What can I actually do with that, right? Like, what is the very next step? And the next step is to realize that if you ever want to retire using only your micro gym, you'll need to develop an HR bench, a staff deep enough to insulate you from staff turnover. Anyone who's on this call right now that's like, oh, I don't really work in the business that much, too much, Stu. I've got coaches that do it. I've got a full-time GM, maybe a full-time assistant GM. Great. That means you're about 2 or 3 people away from having to get back and do it. Let's say you're removed from the business for 10 years. Congrats, successful, awesome. Well, in 10 years, what if those people move? Are you going to start rolling up the bay doors again and coaching those classes when you've been removed for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years? So the only way in that scenario to start incubating yourself with HR, because that's the one thing, if you want to keep your micro gym as the only thing you retire on, meaning the money from the micro gym, you got to have a deep bench. Otherwise, you will eventually be pulled back into it via the nature of employees and turnover in HR. So you get a couple options. You could decrease owner pay and reinvest in the payroll. You could increase your revenue and reinvest in the payroll, or you could reduce profit and reinvest in the payroll. In this scenario, I decided, because I'm a big fan of not keeping a large profit margin, I went ahead and I reinvested those numbers back in the payroll. So let me go back one more. Profit was at 57,500, and I took it down to 10,000. That gave me a lot of play. Now I have my payroll at 92,500 for the year. That's 32%. Remember, if we go back one more slide, it was only at 45,000. But I reinvested profit. I took that profit margin down, so I wasn't keeping a lot of what we'd call retained earnings. Right? I moved it to payroll. But here's the real hard math, guys. Okay, cool. So 92,000, is that going to get you 1 full-timer and 2 part-timers? Is that going to get you 2 full-timers? It's still not a lot of money. Go down to the bottom. What if we needed 2 full-timers at a similar scenario, assuming for someone to buy a house and have a family and put their kids through college, they need $80,000 a year. And again, that's a very general number. Well, 2 full-timers, 3 full-timers, 4 full-timers. You see where the numbers get very, very, holy shit, really, really quick. And that was my come to Jesus moment, that eventually, if you can't insulate yourself from HR turnover enough, like the average micro gym guys is not going to be able to pay $350,000 in payroll. It's just not a thing. They'll be lucky if they're able to pay $200,000 in payroll. So then what was my play? What do I do? How do I insulate myself? Oh, I cannot create wealth out of the gym in and of itself. I have to take those profits and reinvest them into something. And you can do the stock market, you could do index funds, you could do real estate like I did. It'll kill the screen share. But that was my come to Jesus moment for me when I ran numbers and I thought about it. I said, holy shit, how much money do I have to generate to create an HR installation point to where I truly can? I can go on and I can be quote unquote retired and maybe become what I call a shareholder. I still get a check from my company, but I don't work in it. And the reality of the situation is, guys, is even when you're at the top, there are times where you still have to show up and coach. And at a certain point in your life, 45, 50 years old, you still own this gym. It's still profitable, but you're not really fully insulated. It's not going to feel like retirement. And God forbid you have a real bad HR turnover 1 year or 2 years in a row. And you're like, shit, I'm 48 years old and I'm back to square one because I lost 3 of my full-time people over the past 18 months. And that's where in my head, wealth had to come from the real estate play.
Jay, I'm curious, kind of seeing those numbers in that specific example, obviously NCFIT has had, over a decade of evolution of kind of having a lot of come to Jesus moments. I feel like, how do those numbers jive to some of the big decisions we've had to make at NCFIT? Because obviously, we're not investing in real estate. We have these different verticals, but I think that it's solving the same issue that Stu is bringing up, which is, trying to create a place where you don't have to go back in and roll up the bay doors and coach all the classes.
Yeah, I think Stu, first off, I thought that was a really great slide. And I think when some owners who are watching this look at that, like they can't help but hang on, let me pause for a second. Let me actually look at these numbers again. And I thought you did a great job explaining that, this HR insulation. So like, for example, if you have one key employee, if they end up leaving, which happens, right? There's natural attrition, then you're back in the business. And so I think what you did, so let's talk about from a brick and mortar perspective. You could only generate so much revenue depending on how many square feet you have.
Yep.
So let's just say at a high level, you're going to generate, $1 million a year in revenue. Lower level, you're at 100,000, 200,000, whatever per single site location. But what I think that I'd like to talk about, what NCFIT has been, yes, we've diversified our revenue streams. We've invested into a lot of people over the years to create that buffer that we're talking about. But one of the ways that we were able to do that is by creating successful locations and then diversifying out to the digital, the corporate, et cetera. Not everyone should do that, I don't think. But what you can do is, and you made a good point there, Stu, is increase profitability, right? Where you could then invest in other areas. But one thing that we've been having to refocus on now that our gyms have gone through a really deep loss because we're in California and because COVID has hit, is this idea of transparency. I just wanted to talk about that briefly. I think it's really important. So prior to COVID at NCFIT for our brick and mortars, we only shared high level numbers with a very select group of people, very, very select group. And so the problem with what that did was when we would go into the brick and mortars and we'd say, hey, we need to make these adjustments or we need to do this, they weren't coming from the same vantage point for the staff. The staff didn't have the same vantage point that we did, where we're looking at the P&Ls and the financials saying, hey, we need to make this adjustment to remain sustainable. By now getting a monthly performance review with our head coaches and the rest of our team, I think it's been incredibly profound for our business. And we're seeing immediate change in the profitability at the gym. So I'll give you an example. Each and every month, we sit down with our team. What that is that's head coaches, that's general manager, that's anybody that has anything to do with like the brick and mortar gyms. And you could do this at your brick and mortar with whoever's on that team. And you could sit them down and go over, hey, how many new leads did we get in this month? How many cancellations did we get? Show me the cancellation log and show me what the notes are of why that person canceled. How quickly did we respond to that new lead? How many conversions did we get? And what is our average rate, which we just did a rate increase for legacy members, which I'm excited to do a webinar on that after we get through it because it's about to hit in January. I want to tell you guys exactly what % actually canceled. But looking at those numbers and being transparent with our team has allowed all of us to move together in lockstep towards profitability or towards growth. Whereas before, they didn't have that vantage point. Now, when we sit down each month, they're being held accountable for the cancellations. What log did you put? New leads? How many did we get? And I think that transparency is helping the numbers that Stu was just talking about get us back on track. So I guess there's a long-winded way of saying that I think what you're sharing with us, Stu, is incredibly powerful. And a step to grow that would be towards transparency with your team and actually getting them involved in the numbers.
I agree. Every first Monday of every month, Jason, I had a numbers meeting with my staff. And it was important because coaches are going to be great coaches. Front desk kids will be great at front desk, social media, and so on. I need them to be great at business. That level 17 kettlebell cert, I'm not as interested in that as you understanding what my balance sheet looks like and how do we improve it. And that continued business education, I think that allows everyone to kind of row the boat in the same direction versus like, oh, they're having a business meeting. I'm just a coach. I'm going to focus on the coaching on the floor. No, because at the end of the day, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. And everyone's got to become a part of this thing.
Well, and Sue, we've made that mistake at NCFIT, and I think it's a really important note where we always want the vibes right? The vibes are right, the team is driving. But we thought that if we talk about the numbers at times beforehand, maybe we didn't do it the right way. It turned people off and it actually ruined the vibes. But vibes aren't paying the bills. And so what we need to do is find that balance between having positive vibes and team morale and buy-in, which is so important, right? The culture, but also then actually they might even feel more bought in if you pull them in and be transparent with them. That culture even dives even deeper because now they know you're trusting them with sharing these in-depth numbers as well. And I think we made that mistake in the past, and it's been a good learning experience for us coming out of COVID.
Yeah. And even if you're embarrassed by your numbers, still do it. There's a lot of guys are thinking about how many of gym owners on this that are maybe financially are in the right place. You don't like to look at your checking account balance. You go past that line, that line item when you're at the ATM, right? Like, no, I'm good. I don't need to check that. Don't do that, guys. Share even the bad numbers. I promise you it's the fastest way to making them good numbers.
I want to take a little bit of a step back because, profitability, obviously a really important ingredient to getting to the step where you can decide, hey, how am I going to create wealth with this thing, right? Like that 20% profit margin is a place where unfortunately I feel like a lot of gym owners might not even be there yet. And one thing that I think that Stu, you can provide a lot of really cool information on, I've seen a lot of content you've been putting on this is, maximizing floor space and how that plays a role in increasing the profitability of your gym. One thing that we did at NCFIT, that Jason, I remember we caught a little bit of a flack on was like the whole GHDs just don't make sense, right? Like stop purchasing 8 GHD for your gym. That is not the best use of floor space. So Stu, what are some of the learnings that you've, seen from, like the orange theories of the world of taking a certain square footage and really setting it up to maximize profit for your gym?
Yeah, so it gets into the conversation of operational capacity. You look at what we call perimeter models. You talk, a lot of these studios that are high op cap, meaning they generate a lot of revenue in 2,000 square feet. They know exactly, they build their fitness model around the op cap. They don't be like, well, this is the programming I really like that's nifty, and I just going to need to figure out a way to make money doing it because I feel like everyone should have a rower in a 20-person class. Like they think differently. They think op cap first and what I call, average revenue per person per class, meaning the human being that's in there, how much space they take up, how much money do they generate, that kind of scenario. Perimeter models are interesting if you're in a rectangle. So typically, like I just was at an Orange Theory a few weeks ago, they're going to be in a nice long rectangle, 1,800 square feet perimeter model. All the equipment needs to hug the perimeter to open up floor space in the middle. If you're, Barry's boot camp, for example, they go ahead and they make sure that the layout of the facility, the way it flows, means that when they're in their rectangle or square, people on this side never have to travel to the other side. Everything on this half of the room is also on this half. You know what that means? You don't have traffic going like this. I mean, that's how, think of how many, CrossFit kind of workouts are going on where you have traffic just going fucking everywhere. And it creates chaos, but also makes it, you can never plan. It's like, well, how much space is today's workout going to take? Like, well, today's programming is X, so it's going to take up X square feet. And tomorrow's is Y, so it's going to take up Y. That lack of consistency might be a lot of fun for you to program. I'm telling you, though, it is very difficult if you're trying to project growth and increase profitability in the business. Because commercial real estate, kids, going into like buying the building, it's the most expensive thing you've got going on for a while. Then payroll becomes more expensive after your rent, but it's still going to be the thing that's going to always just creep up a couple % every year for as long as you plan to be a brick and mortar. It's just going to get more expensive, and eventually it's going to tell you to respect it, meaning you can't have a 10,000 square foot building.
Yeah, and we've made that mistake before. I mean, the biggest building we've ever leased was like 30,000 square feet. I mean, and the reason why, I don't know why. We just thought bigger was better. But when you actually start evaluating your expenses and this idea of creating long-term wealth, this idea of like profitability is not a bad word. It allows you to reinvest in your people. It allows you to do 401ks for your people. It allows you to give benefits plans to your people, right? And that's what we've been able to provide. But that's because you have to create profitability. And one factor is looking at your floor plan. And so for us at NCFIT, when we look at programming that we put out to the NCFIT Collective, which shout out to the NCFIT Collective. I believe we're putting out the best programming and session plans on the market because we actually use it in all of our gyms, is that we have a variety of different programs and we think about the gym owner. We're not just trying to program, like we said, JHDs, for example, they take up a lot of floor plan space and they're not utilized that often. Or perhaps having 10 ropes is unnecessary because you don't utilize them that much. You just got to think about these things. And it's okay to have that conversation, not to have 3 sets of jerk blocks because they're taking up valuable square footage that could otherwise be optimized for a class.
I think profitability in and of itself, and I'm going to ask for my audience participation on this, is a strategy. In the comments right now, just put up an emoji if you have a profit margin of maybe 18% or higher. 18% or higher is your profit margin. Throw it up in the comments, because here's the thing is, based on what you want to do wealth-wise, that's what dictates where your profit margin should be. So if you're my camp and you want to go ahead and you're like, hey, I want to be able to buy a building. Well, you might need to show a slightly healthier profit margin because a bank is going to look at you and they're going to want to know, like, okay, cool, this guy, they have some reserve cash, they've got a down payment, all this other stuff. Maybe you're another gym owner and they're like, I've got a great financial planner. I want to literally extract as much as I can, and my financial planner is investing that. He's got a Roth, he's got index funds, he's got whatever for me and my staff, and you take that profit margin down really low. I ask for people to participate because I'll see gym owners, they're like, oh, Stu, my 23% profit margin. I'm like, cool. Is your staff making what you like to make? No, I'd really like for them to make more. You got 23 fucking percent sitting right there. What are you doing with it? What, do you have a plan for that money? Is it just going to sit in a savings account, which is the worst place for money to sit ever, just sitting in a savings account? What are you going to do with it? And again, you have to kind of know, what's my plan? Buy a building, invest, or am I just going to stack cash and save under the mattress? Again, whichever floats your boat. But your profit margin, like I know, Jace, you and me talked, you like to see 20%. Return, like, then that's healthy.
Inclusive of the salary for the coach.
Got it.
Or for the owner. I think that's important. When you think about like the average salary from someone listening, let's just say you want to take home $6,000 a month. Let's just say, as an example, right? Well, that $6,000 is inputted into the salary, the payroll that Stu put up on his slide. In addition, you want to get to that 20% profit margin, because where I think some owners kind of get this gray area is that they're placing their profit margin in addition to what they're taking home. But the way I like to think about it is profit is what does it take for the business to actually run? Well, it has you as the owner operator are running that business. Now, if you're separate and we have like what's called a G&A expense in our business, now that's different, right? But if you are actually operating the business, then that is not part of your profitability. That's part of just your payroll and overhead. And your profitability would be a separate entity. So you get $6,000 for your salary plus, let's just say, $10,000 a month in profitability as an example.
Yep. But going back, my profit margin plan was 26%, and that's what allowed me to save. It's what allowed me to be an attractive applicant to buy a building. The second I bought the building, 3%. I was like, that's it. I've got this building. I'm looking at 10 plus years more. And plus with staff installation, I was like, am I really going to hold on to staff for 12 years, 14 years, 15? I'd love to say I'm good enough to do it, but I didn't think it was likely. So drive that profit margin down low, make sure people are getting paid. But that money just got thrown back into my real estate company. I overpaid my real estate company so that now my real estate company showed a profit and I could potentially do another building, whatever it may be. But like that strategy changes as your aspirations for the business changes too.
Well, and on that note, and I Gabe, not to cut you off, I know you want to say something, but the goal here, if you don't want to buy a building, right? Or you don't want to diversify into digital revenue streams or corporate wellness, which is what we've done. Another step is to open another location, which we've also done at NCFIT. But a huge recommendation for everybody listening, and this is like so important because I've learned it the hard way, trust me, is that when you go from one location to two, from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, you need to be able to replicate, and it's hard to replicate you. So if you're the owner operator and people love you, slowly but surely you need to be able to find great people to get in there, say you can go open up this second location. But before you open up the second location, you have to have your systems and processes dialed, and you have to have your profitability. The question that I was asked a long time ago, and I wish I had kind of taken this to heart more, is like, are you truly optimized in your current gym? If you're super optimized, right? Like you literally, 100 members per every 1,000 square feet, your profitability is huge. Well then, okay, let's talk about a second location. But before that, why take on that additional expense, that overhead, and also the ability to separate you from your current location, divide you, if you're not reaching your potential in the first place, right? So that's a really important note for anybody thinking about creating wealth through second location. Well, maybe you could actually create more wealth through a single site because you're not optimizing it.
Yeah. And remember, when we talk about wealth, guys, like there's rich and then there's wealth. And if you open multiple locations like Jason, you've got them all, they're fine tuned and they're humming. That gives you a great opportunity. Great question. Cause obviously I've never walked that path. I've always advised, don't rob Peter to pay Paul. Meaning if location 1 is rock and rolling, like I've nailed it with this one, I'm going to go replicate. Open up number 2 on a separate loan, a separate LLC, because then you can't, if you're robbing this one to pay for that one, it's hard to judge the success of maybe the weaker entity. And then you're like, it took us 3 years to realize this guy sucks. And in the meantime, I drained my key player, my main one. I made this guy pay for his younger brother. And it's not fair because that impacts the employees of the successful business and all that other stuff.
Well, so I agree with you. The challenge becomes if you do, for anyone listening who wants to open up a second or third location, just keep in mind something. If you want your members to have access to multiple sites, you just need to be able to evaluate that. So the way we do it at NCFIT, I would put each location underneath a different corporation or shell for liability purposes. And from the financial perspective, you could always separate it out. And the way we do it at NCFIT is that if you enroll with us at Mountain View, but you use Campbell more often, we'll actually partition that revenue towards Campbell based on where you spend more than 50% of your participation. So that's the way we do it. So when we look at revenue and expenses per location, you're 100% right, Stu. We do not want this winner to then, for lack of a better term, like make us not realize that we have a major loser over here. And that's ultimately what happened to us before COVID, is that we had some locations that were just crushing it for us. And it allowed us to get away with some kind of not so optimum performance at other gyms. Now that we're kind of refocusing everything coming out of COVID, it's allowed us to really segment that and say, hey, this location, I don't care if this one's making 50 grand a month. If this one's losing, we got to fix that problem. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
We actually had our first question come in, and you guys have kind of been answering it because it's about a second location, but let me read it out. And if it feels like we missed anything, we can kind of tackle it now. Hey, Stu and Jay, my thought to create long-term wealth using fitness as a vehicle is opening a second gym about 15, 20 miles away. In an IG story, you posted that owning multiple gyms may be a bad idea. Can you explain the positives and negatives and how to make it work? So again, you guys have kind of been answering it, but Stu, Jay, anything that you want to add to the idea of adding a second location?
Go ahead, Jay.
Jay, you're on mute.
I don't know if the IG story was from me or from Stu. I don't think owning multiple gyms is a bad idea. I mean, obviously we own multiple gyms, but I think it could be a bad idea. And I think it could be a bad idea primarily because if your house isn't cleaned the first one. So here's what happens, right? Stu owns his gym. Stu is the mayor. Stu's the ambassador. People know who he is. If he then, at that point where he's coaching, let's just say 20 hours a week, he's owner operated, he then shifts and opens another one. That's where I've seen challenges happen. Now, if Stu's the owner and then he slowly pulls himself out of the business, he then makes the GM the mayor. He then gets the coaches to be bought in where the culture is strong without him. He just simply comes in and makes sure things are going well because it takes time to do that. But let's just say Stu's out of the business is still running. Then if it's optimized and profitability is high, you can go open a second one. But you want to be aware that when you go from 1 to 2, your members are bought into you potentially, unless you've done a good job hiring additional staff like Stu was talking about earlier. If you are still coaching 15, 20 hours a week, and then all of a sudden you leave, some of your members might have some animosity towards that, and it could be a negative towards your business because now all of a sudden they feel like you're no longer the culture there. But if you've then slowly created other people as those key leaders in your gym, that could be a good time to open a second one. Now, when you open a second one, you got to decide, do you want to take on partners? Do you want to buy the building? Do you want to have the same membership for both sites? And if you are going to have the same ownership structure at both, it works to provide mutual locations. But if you're going to open a new one with a partner and your current one, you're by yourself, it could be awkward if you allow your members to go back and forth. So you need to make sure you have those conversations before you do it.
Well, and one thing, and I'll just do another one here real quick, just to make everyone clear, owning 2 locations or 20 locations, that's not the path to wealth, assuming you don't own the buildings. If you own 2 buildings, whatever, that's different. But assuming we don't, we're just leasing. Remember, wealth isn't a number, guys. Wealth is just a ratio of how much you earn versus how much you spend. That's all wealth is. And I run into rich gym owners often, and they generally like to flex with their vanity metrics. Like, oh, bro, we make $45,000 a month. I just brought 1,100 new Rogue Echo bikes. And when I talk to wealthy owners, that's never my conversation with them. My conversation is, how are you activating the money you make? So if you have multiple locations, guys, and I'm going to kill the screen share for a second. If you have multiple locations, and let's say each of them are doing a 20% margin, yeah, and let's say that 20% nets you in profit annually $100,000. Well, now you have 2 locations doing that. If you were able to rinse to repeat, like Jason said, you've kept a clean house and you were able to replicate. Now you have $200,000. That's still not wealth. It's what you do with that money that creates wealth. Because we think of wealth, I want you to think of wealth will activate, and you'll realize it when you're 50, 60, 70, 80. So those 2 locations generate cash. Cash isn't wealth. That's the opposite of wealth. Wealth is really just what you do with it that allows it to work for you. That's why the one icon was the guy whipping the money and the other one was the guy chasing it. And so think multiple locations will give you more cash, and then you could deploy a wealth strategy. There's just very limited of them, because you could go multiple and be like, my wealth strategy is to get to 10 and sell to Equinox. Hell yeah, I like that play. Good luck to you. Good on you. It's going to be tough, but like, I like that. That could be, because then I'll make X amount of money, Stu, and that'll be my wealth. I'll use that to deploy my wealth play. Just remember, guys, multiple locations, you know, that's definitely a strategy to wealth, but getting multiple locations isn't check the box, I'm now wealthy. You actually have more liability. You have double the liability. You have double the HR potential turnover. You have double the sales retention headaches. You just now have the opportunity, if you do it damn well, to make double the money or triple, however many locations you have.
You know, Stu, you mentioned a couple of times there the owning the building piece, and obviously that's something that you have some firsthand experience with. Now, I recommend anyone that's interested in that specifically. Stu was on Jason's podcast, and they went into it in depth. But can you give us like a quick kind of, you know, top level of what it is you did, how it is you got there?
Just essentially, guys, I saved up money. I got a partner. We went half fit and purchased a building, and I put my gym into it. I utilized an SBA 504 loan, which was a nice low down payment option for us to purchase this building. It makes it way more viable. A lot of you guys might think, oh, I can't buy a building. I promise you, it's actually probably more viable than you would think. And then my plan was, hey, one day I'm going to do something with this building. I don't know what it is. I'm going to lease it back out. I'm going to sell it. I don't know, but my gym's in it. I'm loving life. Well, sooner than later, I got enough knocks on the door that, you know, people wanted to buy it, people wanted to lease it out. And then the number got high enough one day that I said yes to a lease offer that would allow me to effectively retire, because the amount of money I'll make on the lease offer is more than I could ever take home owning my gym for doing nothing. So that was my wealth strategy. So effectively, I don't need a gym anymore. I can just do this. And then, well, what happens when your lease is up? I can lease it out again, or I could sell it. And, you know, and the lease at that point makes me even more money because the loan's more paid off and rates are higher. So that was my wealth strategy. And it deployed, I deployed that in 2016, and 2021 is when I was able to activate that retirement and wealth play.
Now, there is a question. Thanks for that, Stu. There is a question that came in from Stephanie for you, Jay, and I know that you said you were going to touch on it, but just so that everyone knows the question, you know, she wanted to hear a little bit more on the increase of rates for legacy members, and is asking if those are specifically, you know, grandfathered members.
So I think that this is a really cool topic, really, really cool. Very close to my heart right now because we're going through it. I should actually, maybe I'll share my screen later. Well, it has a lot of personal information on it, but what happens is we took our membership base in the Bay Area, and we have never raised their rate. We did one time a 3% increase across the board just to keep up with previous inflation. This is before recent. And a lot of these members, right, we had about 200 that fell in this category, just to kind of give you a number, which is a percent of our membership base here in the Bay Area. But 200 members fell in this category where we were not paying our 226 membership rate. Some of them were paying 218, some were paying 200, as low as we had a few people paying $77 and many people paying $100. And what these people were is when we opened in 2008, we had a regular gym membership at $150 and then a law enforcement or student discount at $100. Now, as we opened, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say like, hey, we were just trying to survive. And so someone come in and be like, hey, can I get the military discount? My grandfather was in the military. I'd be like, sure. Or someone else would come in and be like, hey, my brother-in-law is a law enforcement officer. Can I get it? Or I'm going to school. You guys get the gist. And so what ended up happening is our average client value was actually over the years getting worse and worse and worse because inflation's going up, our costs are going up, we're continuously paying our people more money, our rent's going up, but those rates have stayed the same. And I imagine a lot of you guys are in this particular situation. I imagine a lot of people are. And eventually, and I think right now is a great time, we went out to them and said, listen, so this is our perspective on it. And I'm going to do a whole episode on this because I don't want to give out the data until it actually comes to fruition. But here we are today. We sent out the email on December 1st. What we did prior to that is we met with all of our staff and we explained to them the why. But before any of that, we actually sat down with our finance team and did a deep evaluation on, hey, these 200 members, what % of them would have to cancel to make this not make sense? And at the time, it was 44%. So if 44% or more canceled, this was a stupid business move. If 44% or less canceled,
43%
then it was,
or less.
Yeah, 43%, then it was a good business move. And so we evaluated, we said, okay, it's worth the risk purely from a financial perspective and for us to remain sustainable and pay our people more. So then we talked to our team, we got them bought in, which was incredibly important because as soon as we sent out the email, where do members go? They go to the coaches. So getting them bought in on the why, like, hey, this is where we're at financially. We need to do this to remain sustainable. Boom. We sent out the email. In addition, I think a touch that I did that I think helped is anybody who received more than a $45 increase per month, I personally text messaged them. So my text message was, hey, it's Jason Khalipa from NCFIT. I just sent you an email. Would love to, talk if you have any questions or concerns. So I ended up getting on the phone with a lot of people after that. So far, we are currently at 7% cancellation rate. Now, I think that number is going to bump up to about 15 or 20%, which is the reason why I didn't want to give this information out until after February when it actually goes all into an effect in January. But so far, I can say there was really an important non-financial thing that I didn't realize was going to happen. We had some members who were staying with us purely because their rate was so low. They weren't leaving us. But because of this rate adjustment, it allowed us to actually find out who's really bought into NCFIT and where we're going in the future. And for those members that were only staying with us because they had a low rate, who maybe at times were challenging, they essentially weeded themselves out. And now we have a group of individuals who are all paying the same thing for the same service and are all bought in on where we're going in the future. So I'll get back to you on that. I know I was a little bit long-winded, but I think that's the best way to do it so far.
Stu, I'm curious if you ever had to go through a similar exercise with your membership.
I think I've done 215 price raises since 2015. Average cancellation rate is 3 to 7%. The most I recommend people raise prices at $30 is very easy in a letter to say $1 a day and make it seem. And a very important phrase, and everyone write this down. When you go to write it, Dear Sally, in the email, or to have is to the whole membership. And if you feel your circumstance deserves special consideration and is unique from everyone else, please email jason@ncfit.com, because people read that and they go, oh man, I got to be a douche to think I'm special and I shouldn't get my shit price raised either. So Jason's 100% right, guys. I did the math on that. So if he raised $45 and the average person came 3 days a week, so 12 times a month, that's $3.75 per class. And when you break it down like that to a customer, because 45 sounds heavy, but if you break it down on a per class level, it feels lighter. And this just makes another argument. If you ever have people who have frequency-based pricing, this is where if you do price raise across the board, it allows people to kind of tier down if they need to, because some people are on a budget and they need to be at a certain number. And that just means maybe they get less classes or whatever it may be. But no, I'm excited. I want to be on the next webinar. I want to listen. I'm very excited to see the data on that.
Yeah, and obviously we have punch cards as an option, and we sent out 2 different emails. One was to people who came in a certain amount of times. One was to people who didn't come in that often. We actually recommended that they should go to punch card, just so you don't look like a jerk, right? You come in 3 times a month, and we're trying to raise your rate. We then led with, hey, based on your participation, it might be better. So we definitely want to dive into that more in depth. but the jury's still out on exactly what's going to happen. The rate changes take effect January 1st. But I do think if you are going to do it now is a good time, because people are realizing that, costs are going up and people should be paying the same thing for the same service.
Stu, we got a question for you here from Chris. How critical to the commercial real estate strategy is putting your gym into it for at least the initial term?
It's required if you're going to do an SBA 504. You have to be in it. The SBA does not give you money to investors being people who buy the products and the buildings and put other businesses in there. So it's only owner operated. 51% if it's an existing building. If you're building new construction, it's 60% occupancy. So again, if you buy a 10,000 square foot building, you would need to occupy, your business would need to occupy at least 5,100 square feet if it's existing, or 6,000 square feet if it was a brand new build, new construction. I think it is because, realistically, that owner, that company's got to pay for this whole thing. And I don't know about you guys, I didn't want to stop being a gym owner. Like, this was this was not my plan to stop playing gym owner. I'm sure these are champagne problems. I'm not complaining, but that's what I want for most people who do this. I want to be like, no, I want my own building. I want to be paying my own destiny. I want to be paying off my mortgage. That's what I want, is my own building. And then I can tap out whenever I want, or whatever my loan, if you go through an SBA, like 504 loan, there's prepayment penalties and stuff like that you got to worry about. But I think everyone should think about making it an owner operated scenario.
Got it. We have another question from Stephanie. Do you have any resources for me to look at to identify specific criteria like price per class, how much to charge per square foot, so I can see kind of where to make an adjustment?
I think she's going back to the price raise question.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, so we do have some of that. Stephanie, if you want to just reach out to us offline, we could try and provide some of that. But at a high level, our goal as a business is to get 100 members per every 1,000 square feet. That's the goal for our locations, just at a very high level. So if you have 3,000 square feet, we want to get to 300 active, reoccurring, paying members there at an average base rate of now $226. That's the goal, is 100 per every 1,000 square feet. Now that breaks down if you're maybe in Texas and you have 10,000 square feet versus California, where the real estate prices are really expensive and we can't justify taking on more square footage. But at a high level, that's where we're at. But if you want to reach out to us at the Collective, I'll see if I can provide you with a little bit more tangible data than what I just said right now.
How many, so Arthur followed up that with how many classes at the 100 per 1,000?
We're just rebuilding. I mean, at Mountain View, we had 1,000, we had 100 per every 1,000 square feet. We had 6,000 square feet, and we had 100 classes there, I think, a week. That was pre-COVID. Now we're down to like 45 classes, and we're rebuilding back up to that level, to give you an idea. Class cap, prior to COVID, there was no class cap. Now we're capping classes at 16 to 18, depending on the space and the size. And we're doing pre-registration for that, which at first, I think I was reluctant to do because that wasn't part of the culture. But now, since COVID, it's been really streamlined. And I actually think people registering for classes has been a very good thing. It sets us up for success, allows us to know who's coming in, and it has some level of accountability for people to come in.
And if I could piggyback off that to help Stephanie's question, that's what Jason's talking about with the class cap. It essentially allows you to get to what I talked about, average revenue per person per class. So Stephanie, if you had to make $50,000, now how much per week would you have to make? How many classes do you have per week? And what is your class cap? So you'd already have to have an established class cap. But you run that math down, that means you need to generate, in this example, $18 average revenue per person per class in order to make $50,000.
I love that, Stu. You just answered her question so well.
Yeah, it's sixth grade math, but it doesn't make it easy because you really have to think a few things. You got to know what your class cap is, Steph, and then you got to kind of have in your head, where are we kind of at the limit of classes? Are we going to grow classes? And you got to really know this number. A lot of people think they know that number, how much they want to make. Generally, they undershoot it based on what they want their coaches to make, they want to take home. But that would be the basic breakdown for anyone who wants to get down to what an average revenue per person per class would need to be. And then that'll help you, based on your current pricing, what you need to raise your prices.
Super helpful stuff there. Joseph chimed in here with Mid Valley Fitness from the great state of Texas. He's got 5,500 square feet of working space and 3,300 monthly rent, also working back from COVID, and just says he greatly appreciates the info. But thank you for sharing that info there, Joe. Stu, I had a follow-up question with you here. You know, when you did have your gym, you know, I know that you made a lot of changes in terms of operational capacity and the type of programming you were running there. What were some of the things that you know, put into place that really helped the operational capacity at your gym specifically?
You got to grab the movements that take operational capacity. Back squats with a rack. It doesn't make sense to me. If you're, what are you going to have, a 22-person class and have 22 fucking squat racks? Well, Stu, everyone can double up. Yeah, I'm going to find people that are the same height. Remember, kid, it's not about the same weight because you can strip plates on and off. It's having people the same height. That's the limitation with partnering with back squats. Have you ever done that? So I looked at that and I looked at a rig and I looked how big it was. And I to me, it just looked so archaic. I was like, this has got to get streamlined. My cell phone is now this small. My mom's cell phone looked like this, right? Everything's getting smaller. So I got rid of the rig and I hung from the rafters rings. And I created an in-place model. I looked at spin studios and yoga, and I said, those are the most cash-flowing operations. They crush micro gyms 3-1. So why? Because they know exactly where everyone's going to be. So I created an in-place model. We had an 8x6 square. I hung a high set of rings, hung a low set of rings. That way, no matter who went to that fucking square, they could do pull-ups or ring rows or pull-up variations. Everyone got their own barbell. Got rid of 7, went down to 5. 5 still can hold almost 300 pounds if you have comp plates. You know, I went from everyone having an erg to having 50% of the class have an erg. So we ran a 50% erg model, 24 people in my class, 12 ergs. People would register. So little things like that. Things that made people travel, wall balls, gone. Kipping handstand push-ups, any kind of handstand push-ups, gone. Anything that made people travel that they couldn't have their own. Because I can get everyone a cube, a plyo box. I can get everyone a 5-foot barbell. I can have enough dumbbells that everyone can have their own pair. It was the big, heavy things. Everyone having a squat rack, everyone having a sled, everyone having an erg that became, would not make me as much money as I needed to in my space.
You know, rig, man, that's blasphemy, you know?
Blasphemy. I think what's really interesting about this conversation, Stu, I think you might have gone a little to this side compared to where we're at, but I do think what's interesting is that at the NCFIT Collective, for those gym owners and coaches who do not use our programming, we really focus on this idea of bridging the gap between like running profitable locations and providing a phenomenal fitness experience. That's what we do, because what happened was years and years ago when we were following other programs, it was great for maybe if you're a sole person, but when you try and run a class, there has to be this idea in your head that how am I actually going to implement this? And then how am I going to actually put enough people through it that I could run a gym that creates any level of wealth and profitability? So for us, when we're looking at our programming, we haven't gotten rid of the rig. We haven't done those type of things, but we do adjust the workouts in a way that allows the gym owner to run more people in a smaller space and create profitability. And that's also why we have the NCX program, which is just fundamental strength conditioning instead of these higher complexity. So we recognize not many athletes, you know, were necessarily interested in that. I think, Stu, an area of, we're going to talk about wealth and we're going to talk about sustainability and profitability. An area we have to talk about is this idea of, you know, is your product on the floor delivering a good enough or a wide enough product that will attract enough people to create profitability? If you have 40 members in your gym and you've tried everything, maybe what you're offering isn't necessarily what as many people in your area are looking for. And you need to then shift. And I'm not saying you have to switch from hardcore CrossFit to Pilates, but what I am saying is you might need to make an adjustment from your programming side to be more open-minded. That not everybody wants to do kipping handstand push-ups and muscle-ups every single day. And that's what we've had to do at NCFIT with the NCX program and our Metcon program. We might sprinkle some of that stuff in, but we do it in a way that is constructive, even if you have a new person coming into the gym. So yes, that is a pitch for our programming, but it's also a pitch for any owner to look at their programming and say, hey, is this actually what our members want, need, et cetera? And can we run enough people through it to create a profitable location? Is a tough it's a good conversation to have.
I agree, man. I think a lot of owners who are still young in this game, they still program or pick the fitness methodology that they want to do or they enjoy doing. And that's fine. And you get to a certain point though, where you're like, if there's not enough people who's also jiving with that, or if you write a workout and you and 3 coaches are the only people who can do it as written or whatever it may be, you got to kind of really sit back and evaluate. If you open the business up so you could have awesome workouts, you spend a lot of money to have a gym membership. That's it, So just one of those things. But I agree, having variety in your programming, like what the NCFIT Collective offers, is a great way to diversify that.
So we're having some questions come in here in the last 10 minutes, and Clifton actually had a question that I had, and it applies to Jason, what you said, and Stu, the changes that you mentioned, because whether you're, going to an NCX model or taking the rig out altogether, how do you deal with those members that are obviously going to have a problem with, their favorite movements going away?
Sure. So I didn't just whip out movements. We created an entire different programming method called tempo training. And essentially just what I did, guys, is we took tempo and we just kind of exasperated it. So instead of someone needing to deadlift 405 with a flip grip, we had them deadlifting 185 double overhand with a hand release once the plates touch. I saw Jason, you call them library deadlifts the other day. I was like, what a clever fucking name for that. I just been calling them we call them like a hand release deadlift, just nice and slow and steady.
I trademarked that.
I love it.
You owe me 30 cents.
But we switched movements out. We added tempo to everything that would just prohibit those level of weights. And people didn't mind because it still burned. It was still really tough and there was less risk of injury, things like that. But it was a programming methodology change, not just I have a certain thought in my head and I'm going to subject all my customers to it.
Got it.
And so something for us, I just want to highlight that, is that NCFIT, we started off very traditional CrossFit, and we followed .com for an entire year. And then we realized that wasn't for us. And so we shifted where I did the programming, but it was still pretty traditional CrossFit. I was teaching seminars at the time. It was pretty traditional. Then over the years, we started realizing that, hey, different people might want different things, and that's okay. And what also was happening is that we had a new member come in, and if you're snatching or doing something of that nature, sometimes their experience wasn't optimal. And so, yes, you could be the best coach in the world, but we had to bridge that gap with having a mixed programming. So what we have is we have NCX and NCMECON. NCMECON is a little bit more complex, NCX a little less complex. And our schedule is about 50-50 at most of our locations, with the exception of Redwood City, which is a little bit more traditional CrossFit-ish. So we focus a little bit more on Metcon. And so for any owner out there who's maybe thinking about this, is you don't need to go cold turkey, but what you could do is maybe start diversifying your class, where you could maybe start incorporating once or twice a week or whatever, and see how your members react to it with the different type of programming.
Jay, a quick question for you that's actually a little relevant. This is something that we're kind of talking about at NCFIT. I'd like to sublease some space. What are some steps to determine price points per square foot?
Well, I think a great place to start is how much do you pay per square foot? I mean, that's a simple way of looking at it. Hey, if I pay, like right now, for example, let's just say we pay $4 per month per square foot here in California, right? You then want to look at your triple net. So let's just say your gross lease, if you have a gross lease, that's different, but let's just say it's $4 plus you're paying the property taxes and maintenance for the landlord, of course. Let's just say you're all in at $450 a square foot. Well, at a minimum, you have to charge at least that, unless there's some kind of intrinsic value that they're providing by maybe having a kids taekwondo that then gets the adults over to your class, maybe. But at a minimum, you need to know exactly how much you pay, and that's a great baseline. But then the other thing you got to ask yourself is, how much is it actually worth having this person in there? So meaning, let's just say you cover your costs. Well, now you have another person that you have the risk and liability of them not setting the alarm at night, leaving the lights on at night, having a bunch of people come through your location that then requires more heating, water, sewer, toilet paper. So you got to take those into considerations as well. A long time ago, we subleased to a lot of people. And we ended up seeing that in this one location, it was 30,000 square feet. We had this one tenant leave the lights on average once or twice a month, which when I did the math on it was like an additional $300 to $400 per month just for them leaving the lights on. So we had to take that in consideration.
Yeah. So when you're looking at that, Jason's 100% right. Say 5,000 square feet, you paid $5,000 a month, you're paying $1 a square foot. Then you add, if you Google it and just look into commercial real estate load factor, we would attribute a load factor to how much load is that person going to have. And think about it too. Like Jason said, you have a bunch of tenants in there. Are they all going to want the sign on the front of the building? Is your building now going to look like a NASCAR with just all these different logos on it and make it more confusing to find you? How many bathrooms are there? Will that amount of people be able to, to utilize that, or will that become a headache for your customers? I've got 2 subtenants when I had the gym, and I had to build it out to accommodate them. Storage is the one thing most people don't think of. Like, man, we don't have that much storage. We put our fit aids and old t-shirts and mops and brooms back there. Well, now you have X amount of more tenants that they need storage as well. Every business needs some storage on site. So there's a lot of things to think about. It's not as easy. I have an office space and how much, but it's at least exactly your cost times a load factor. And I would generally go a minimum of 2, meaning if I get charged $1 a square foot, I'm going to make exactly $2, if not more. So a minimum of twice what I'm being charged is what I would be considering.
Yeah, a lot of things to think about there. Last question that we have here, and we'll wrap up with this one, just kind of an open-ended one. A few of your biggest changes and things that you've learned from the lockdowns and rules implemented. For example, Jason, you mentioned how capping classes is something that we had to do and has obviously improved the business now.
So I would say that COVID has been incredibly profound on our business. And I say that in a positive and a negative way. Our revenue dropped very, very, very substantially, similar to many people here. And in particular in California, we had lockdowns. One of our locations was shut down for 13 months, right? And that's a prime location for us. So we learned a lot about a few things. One is leases. I'm going to be a lot more careful about signing another lease. And I'm going to make sure there's language in there that could protect me from a governmental shutdown in the future. That's a big, high level thing. I'd also be more aware of, do we even want to sign any more leases, or do we just want to go buy buildings? Because we're taking on that liability anyways. So that's something. Other things that I think I mentioned at the beginning of this call was transparency. I think that has been really, really great for us. I don't know if we would have done that transparency had COVID not happened, where we have seen our revenue drop, just 7 figures, right? A lot of revenue drop. So now getting our team on board and being transparent with them allows them to feel like they're a part of the solution. And I think that that's something we should have done a long time ago, because even though we were profitable and successful before, maybe we could have been 10x that had we done a better job getting our whole team moving in lockstep together, instead of just a few of us having the vantage point and the rest of us not really understanding. So those are some things that I think have been incredibly necessary. And our team realizes that we needed the A team on the floor, and there's no more room for this. Well, they're pretty good. It's we either need great coaches on the floor and great follow-up, or we're not going to be successful and get back to where we were.
Yeah. I think that class registration part is huge. And one thing, so I've always had a class registration and class caps, but when COVID happened, we had to give up, really dial in our consequences for that. I always recommend to people 8 hours, an 8-hour cancellation window, meaning if you don't cancel, 8 hours away from class is the last time you can cancel. Anything within 8 hours, you are charged a cancellation fee that should be equivalent to a drop-in. It needs to hurt. I got a guy I was talking to today. He's like, how much your cancellation fee if they no-show on class? And he goes, oh, $5. I'm like, you got a lot of those, huh? He goes, yeah. I was like, it'd be better if people were in that class. You know that, right? That $5 hit each time is kind of cool, I guess. But make it so that it hurts so people don't want to. And 8 hours, what people ask, why 8? The average boutique at 45, all those guys, is 12. 8 at least incubates you overnight, meaning coaches have an idea what they're walking into. A coach thinks he has 15 people in class and he shows up and there's 3. So that 8 hours to just incubate you from the night to the next day classes. But most people, and I know this now because I'm a civilian, I just registered for a class I'm going to tonight. I register for classes now, and it's I'm always registering at least 8 hours out because I'm always looking to the next day. When am I going to go? All that stuff. But that's another thing. Everyone's got to, if you have a hard time raising prices, like Jason was talking about, you might also have a hard time charging members for when they cancel and no-show the classes. But I promise you, it's a sophistication move for higher end micro gyms and gyms in general for a reason.
There you go. Well, we're coming up at the end of the hour here. Stu, I want to give you a chance. I know you're doing a lot of really cool things on the real estate side for gym owners. So if you please want to let this group know, where can they find you if they have any more questions, need help on that side of things?
Yeah, I literally stay at home and I just make carousels all day for the Instagram account for the gym real estate company. That's literally all I do. I just make carousels so that you guys can get better leases, negotiate them, have better information about buying a building. Go just check out on Instagram at Gym Real Estate, and that is the new company I'm working on. We help gym owners lease and buy buildings. We provide guidance, brokers, all that kind of stuff. So as you guys kind of evolve and start moving towards that world, whether it's a new lease, renegotiating a lease, or you want to buy a building and have someone to guide you through it, I'd love to talk with you.
Awesome. Jay, you want to sign us off here?
Yeah, guys, I think Stu has a lot of information. I also think he could add a lot of value from a lease or purchase perspective. So make sure you check out what Stu's doing. I think that anytime we've signed leases, we have realtors or realtors who have no idea what we do. And we have to do all the work to figure out the sound and this and that and whatever. Partnering up with a guy like Stu could help you alleviate those issues before they even end up happening. Maybe even ones that you don't know are going to happen because you're in a strip mall and you're trying to open up next to a hair salon. Might not be a good idea. So make sure you hit up Stu. Justin, yes, we did implement a 3% increase in all of our contracts. We have that language. We can share that with you at NCFIT Alpharetta. Team, we just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be here. This is something I share with our classes every time that I coach, which is you could be anywhere you want right now. You could be eating donuts, you could be at Taco Bell, but you chose to be here listening in on this conversation, which means you want to enhance your business or, in the class's perspective, enhance their fitness. And I just want to thank you for being here. A lot of gratitude for that. So thank you so much. And make sure you check out the NCFIT Collective if you haven't, because we're really doing something special there.
Thank you, guys.
We'll see you guys next month. Thank you, Stu. Thank you, Jay.
Got it.